We can jump in. So welcome everybody to this civility session in partnership with Oakland University Center for Civic Engagement. We are going to get started in just a couple of minutes. I'll just tell you what the format will be and then encourage you to keep your microphone on mute, but use the chat to ask questions as we go through the program. So we'll begin with an introduction from Oakland University in just a moment. We will do a video from our sponsor, Delta Dental, and showing why they've chosen to sponsor this Civility project. And then Nolan and Stephen will jump in and we'll start our conversation. And then we will have a couple of breakout sessions where you guys will be put into groups of 4 or 5, and we will give you a question. You'll have an opportunity to talk in small groups and explore where your beliefs come from and what motivates them, and we start to build civility on a person-to-person basis. And then we'll come back after each one and we will talk about how that went, what insights or inspirations you had in the process, and we will finish with some questions and answers. We try to get to everybody's questions, so please do put them in the chat and I will keep monitoring that. So without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to Dave Giulio from Oakland University for a little welcome.
Thanks, Lynn. I'll be very brief and just say thank you to Nolan and Stephen for doing this important work. It is something that's been on my mind as somebody who's on a college campus most of the time, well, except during COVID, but that I see in our work here on campus that is in such need. And it gets at one of the central things that we strive to do at the Center for Civic Engagement here at OU. And one of our goals is to have Oakland become known as a convener of conversations about issues of public importance. But of course, we want to have those conversations in the quote unquote right way. We want them to be civil, productive, and actually lead somewhere, right? So in that vein, the advisory board of the center has come up with what we're calling the tenets of civic engagement and productive dialogue. And I'm going to bring these up just because I think they speak so much to what Nolan and Stephen are doing. So those tenets are to engage in respectful dialogue, employ honest listening, model civil behavior and tone, support free and open discourse, consider viewpoints other than our own, and find opportunities to agree, not just disagree. And I think, as I said, I think that's what Nolan and Stephen are doing. It's great that it is spreading around Southeast Michigan and even nationally with attention from MSNBC all the way to Epic Times. So thank you to Nolan and Stephen again. Thank you to Lynn for facilitating tonight, and I'll sit back and enjoy the show.
Thanks so much, Dave, and thank you for hosting this and really drawing such a crowd. So really, really grateful to Oakland University and to you. So I'd like to start just very quickly by sharing a little video from our sponsor, Delta Dental, and thank them for making this program possible, free of charge to you and to Oakland University. So let's just hear from them.
We are living in challenging times. Politics is polarizing. Racism is rampant. The pandemic is frightening, and families are divided. Tough times require more dialogue and more understanding. But navigating our differences constructively is hard work. Delta Dental believes that healthy, smart, vibrant communities are also civil and harmonious. They are places where disagreement does not have to be toxic or destructive. Civility starts with listening. Welcome to the Civility Project.
Thank you again to Delta Dental for making this possible. And let's jump in. So Stephen and Nolan, I would love it if you could introduce where the Civility Project came from and what we're trying to do here.
Well, Lynn, if I can start, I'll start by addressing a question. I think it was from John Lepofsky. Can you stop hate? And, that's a big job for two guys like us. But what we can do is, we think, and the purpose of this project is we can stop people from knee-jerk hating the people they disagree with. It's probably one of the silliest reasons to engage in hate and to cut yourself off with someone. And the genesis of this project, we started putting this together without even knowing it years ago, when it occurred to us that, we got along pretty well, even though we passionately disagree and have some pretty vigorous discussions. We get angry, we get mad, but we, became closer and closer friends. And it occurred to us that our other friends, the other people in our individual circles, didn't want to approach each other. They didn't want to reach across that divide and develop relationships and see what they could learn and gain from each other. So we started putting together bourbon nights where, whiskey helps about everything. And so we started putting together these bourbon nights where we'd bring, Steve would bring a bunch of people, I'd bring a bunch of people, and we'd put them together and encourage them to get to know each other as people and go from there in terms of trying to have productive conversations. And so that morphed into the Michigan or Great Lakes Civility Project with the help of Delta Dental. We thank them very much. We got to thinking about this last year, that perhaps 2020 would be a hard year on civility, and we never dreamed be.
Yeah, one of the things that I think that we were both thinking originally about this was that it would be, would be framed by the 2020 presidential election, which, if you go back to a year ago, seemed to be shaping up to be a very, a very contentious campaign and debate, and something that would draw people's worst sort of instincts out of them. You think about where we are now, no one could have pictured all of the things that would have happened between last September and right now. And so the idea of civility has taken on even more of a premium, I think, because there are even bigger things in the presidential election that are testing our patience and testing our ability to be able to talk with one another about what's going on and what we think ought to happen. One of the really kind of key exercises that Nolan and I did that led us to the idea of the Civility Project was when StoryCorps, the NPR National Story Collection Project, came to Detroit a few years ago. And StoryCorps is about kind of memorializing American relationships, taking the time to document the way that we interact with people that we're connected with. People take their family members, a lot of people take their spouses and things like that. Well, I took Nolan to StoryCorps with me, and I said that what I wanted he and I to go there and do was not talk about the things that divide us or the things that we don't agree on. I wanted us to talk about who we were. I wanted us to talk about where our ideas and our beliefs come from, because we hadn't done that really. We'd been friends and colleagues for about a decade at that point, and had never sat down and talked about, well, why do you consider yourself a conservative, Nolan? Why do I consider myself a liberal? And so we did that for an hour, and it was a remarkable revelation, a set of revelations for both of us about what the other thinks. And as well as we knew each other before that, I think we knew each other better after and had a better understanding of the genesis of the disagreements that we have, where they come from, and why they exist. But we also had a better understanding, I think, of more of the similarities between the two of us. The idea that we share a lot of experiences and background, and that is likely more the basis for our ability to talk with each other and disagree and not have it come to insults or blows than anything else. And that really gave us the idea that if we could encourage other people to do the same thing, to step back from the argument, to step back from the disagreements and try to figure out where people are actually coming from and why, that you could produce more reasonable, solutions-oriented dialogue.
That, you know, I think that's a really good point. And if you asked someone, I mean, if you ask somebody on the left, why do you think people on the right feel the way they do? And they'll say, you know, more often than not, they'll say, well, because they're stupid, they're ignorant, they're hateful, they're racist, whatever. You ask somebody on the right why people on the left feel the way they do, and they'll say, oh, they hate the country, you know, they're communists, they're what, this, that. Everybody assigns these negative attributes to people who don't think like them. And what we discovered, and I mean, the premise that we came out of that with is that good people come to their opinions in the same way. They take the facts, they take the information, they take the data, they take the situation, they apply their own values and their experiences to that, and they come up with an opinion. That opinion is different than yours, doesn't necessarily make them evil or stupid, doesn't mean they hate America. They've just had a different life and a different worldview come out of that than you do. And if you get to that point of understanding, you can develop a respect. And we're not talking about you have to agree and say, oh yeah, you know, your opinion is right or your opinion makes sense. But you come to a respectful point in that there's a reason that they have that opinion. And when you understand that, you can begin to have productive conversations without the resentment, without the anger, and without the accusatory tone, but mostly without the hate. You know, again, what we're trying to do is diffuse a little bit of the hate that marks today's discourse, because you're never going to get anywhere in terms of productive conversation if you can't get beyond the hate.
Absolutely. And, you know, you mentioned, Nolan, at the beginning that you used to have bourbon nights. And, you know, when we started this over Zoom, everybody brought their glass of wine or something to Zoom. And, you know, what happened to that? We should go back to it.
Now, these may be underclassmen, a lot of them, Lynn.
Absolutely. Anyway.
We don't want to get Dave in trouble. Yeah, but, you know, it is true. You know, when Steve and I first began engaging, it was most often in that sort of setting where we're just sitting, where we, you know, we're sharing a whiskey, and, you know, it was conducive to asking the sort of questions it takes to learn about somebody. And, you know, we downed a lot of bottles before we got to a place where, you know, we could move to the next step.
Well, that's because when you sit across from someone and you sit face to face, you can't hate them. You start to get to know them as a person.
And that's a good point, Lanny, because you can, you know, you see them, suddenly you start seeing them as not just somebody with a different political view than me, but as parents, as somebody's child, as a productive member of the community, as somebody who does good and great things in their life. And you find the things about them that you can embrace if it's not their political opinions, and you can have more productive conversations. And too often today, we just knee-jerk hate people because of what we hear them say, or what, in our cases, what they write, what views they express. And sometimes people do express hateful stuff, and there's no getting around that, but that's not the norm. And, you know, I tell a story, and always in these sessions, that, you know, one time, Steve and I were up on Mackinac Island for the Republican State Convention. We were both covering it. And you can imagine that wasn't the most comfortable place in the world for Steve. But he and I were at the bar, and we talking, having a big time. And I walked away for a minute, and these two women, very conservative women, they were on a conservative website, pounced on me and said, Oh, that's Steve Henderson you're talking to. How could you stand him? How could you be drinking with him? How could he be your friend? We just hate him. And I said, you hate him? And they said, we hate him. I said, I said, have you ever met him? No, we haven't met him. Have you ever talked to him? No. I said, do something for me. Walk over there now, introduce yourself, and just have a conversation with him. I mean, 2 hours later, I had to pull them off, Steve, to get him out of the bar. And they walked away saying, oh, he's so wonderful. He's so charming. He's so smart. They still disagreed with him, but they understood a little better where he was coming from and who he was. And I would say those two still have positive feelings about Steve, even when they disagree with what they hear him say.
Yeah, so before we jump into our breakout rooms, I would love for you guys to spend a couple minutes talking about how we go about building civility. So everybody's nodding their heads, they agree with what you're saying, and then they're saying, well, how do we do that? So could you throw out a few quick tips about how the rest of us can enact this in our lives?
So, we talk about some kind of core principles when we talk about civility. And the first one, the most important probably, is the art of listening. And when we use that word, I think we intend it to mean something a little different than most of us think of when we think of that word. For a lot of us, listening means that we're just not talking, that maybe somebody else is talking and we are not interrupting them. But we may also be sitting there and thinking about our own ideas and thinking about what we might say back to this person when they stop talking, as opposed to really listening to what the other person is saying and trying to kind of identify with it. Really trying to understand not just what the other person is saying, but why they may be saying it, and why they might believe it, and maybe even ask a question when they are done talking about why they believe what they believe, or sort of drill down on one of the things that they're saying. It's a really different and more active process, I think, than most of us think of when we think of the word listen, or when we think of what listening really is. And that's not easy, right? It's actually, it actually requires a fair amount of work to kind of get out of ourselves, to get out of our own heads, and really be in a conversation or an exchange with somebody else, to the point where you are placing, a certain amount of value on what the other person is saying, even if you disagree with it. Another core principle we talk about is never walking away for good. Never saying, I'm done with this person. I am not going to have a conversation with this person again. And I think Nolan and I are a pretty good example of that. I mean, if you've seen us on television or heard us on radio, or seen us in live appearances, I mean, we really get into it. We have really deep, fundamental disagreements about a wide range of things. And if you get us going on the right thing, I mean, we can really get into it. And there's a lot of passion involved, and sometimes there's some anger involved. And there are times when I think both of us have left debates with the other feeling bad about what we said or what they said, or just just the way it went. But we also always leave that conversation saying, I'll be back. I'm not leaving for good. Whatever he said, whatever he did in that conversation is not the end of the interaction between us. That the value we place on being able to have the conversation, no matter how testy it might get, is higher than anything else. That you always return to it as a way of expanding your understanding of what other people think, and a way of valuing exchange. And then I would say, the third kind of core principle relates to that second one, which is you know, we don't avoid hard subjects. We don't avoid controversial issues. You know, when we talk about things, we talk about whatever's on our minds or whatever's in the news. And a lot of times it does evoke really strong emotional reactions or intellectual reactions from the both of us, and we disagree. And because we understand that each of us is committed to the idea of the value of the exchange, we're able to have really intense debates, really intense arguments, and not risk the relationship more broadly. That also is really difficult. All of these things that I'm saying here, I know may sound kind of easy, but they're not. They take a lot of work. They take a lot of effort, and they take a different kind of approach than I think we are encouraged to take in so many of our interactions today. It's different than the way that we're encouraged to relate to people on social media. It's different than the way that we see people interacting with each other on cable news and in this kind of bizarre 24-hour quote unquote news cycle where most of the news is just people sitting there fighting about what's happened. This kind of requires a step back from that and taking a different approach than what we see and hear around us and what we're encouraged to do to try to build a relationship that allows us to have difficult conversations.
I would add to that the idea that a conversation is not a competition. If you approach a competition, I got to win, I got to score points. It's going nowhere. Before Steve and I started doing our TV show together years ago now, I had another host that I did the show with, a couple of them actually, but one, every show, she'd show up with the goal of trying to get a zinger, to slam dunk me, to embarrass me. It got to be extraordinarily unpleasant. I know it was unpleasant for us to participate in. It was unpleasant for people to watch, and it created an environment where we were unwilling to do the give and take, to give anything in our conversation. It was all about winning and scoring. And when Steve came on board, one of the first things that I noticed about him, and one of the first things I respected about him, is that he understood this idea that we weren't in some competition, that we were there to have meaningful discourse, even if it got loud, even if it got contentious, that he wasn't there, that we weren't there to sink each other, that there was value in the relationship we had, and we had to, there were certain boundaries we had to observe and certain rules we had to observe. And that first one was, don't cheap shot each other in the name of scoring a point. And I think that happens too often in our daily conversations where, we're trying to get one over on the other person. Go in there with this honest goal of learning something, of sharing something, of trying to gain a better understanding, and don't go in with your mind made up. So
we're going to hop into breakout rooms in a minute, but Marty asked a question. And also I just want to encourage everybody who's come in since we started, use the chat to put your questions there. We will get them answered. If not before the breakout rooms, then for sure after. But Marty asked, have any views changed in these conversations with you guys? So have either of you succeeded in bringing somebody over to believe what you believe, or is that not even the goal?
In terms of me and Steve, I wouldn't describe it as, oh gosh, yes, we've changed. Our goal when we're in these conversations, not to convert each other, and you shouldn't be trying to convert one another. We're not lecturing each other, preaching to each other. We're trying to get a little bit more understanding. I will say that, I can't think of an instance where 100% change because Steve convinced me and showed me the error of my ways. Now he's tried, but I will say I've gained a broader understanding and a view and have added layers to my opinions because of what I've heard from Steve and what I've heard in terms of him speaking about his own experiences and how an issue applies personally to him. And I feel like I've broadened a little bit my understanding of some issues. And, you know, I always start out with the idea that I could be wrong. And I use these conversations to hone, to check my own opinion. And I've tried to maintain a willingness to, you know, if I'm hearing something that makes a whole lot more sense than what I'm saying, to acknowledge that. And I think we have to be willing to do those.
I think one way to think of it is that the goal is actually not to try to convince the other person to think the way you do. I think there are two other goals that are really important. One is to get the other person to understand why you think what you think, where your thinking comes from, in the hope of kind of broadening their understanding of your side of things, like Nolan was talking about. And I think we do that. I think the two of us experience that a lot in the interchanges that we have. But the other goal, I think, and Nolan talks a lot about this too, is strengthening your own arguments. Your beliefs and your arguments are stronger for their understanding of what the opposite or a different perspective is. And you can't get that by talking to people, only talking to people you agree with. You can't get that perspective from people who are on your side. You have to be able to talk to people who think differently to be able to do that. And I think especially when, you know, I think especially in our own work, I think you see echoes of that understanding that we've gotten from the other. That the arguments I might make about something are different because of the exchanges that I have with Nolan, because he'll say something that I wasn't thinking, or that I wasn't thinking of. And I think the same thing is true of him. And so it's not so much of a, let me convince this person, as it is, let me make sure this person actually understands what I'm saying and that I understand him as well.
Yeah, I mean, if Steve picks apart one of my arguments in a hot minute, I'm damn sure not going to go back and put that in the newspaper. I'm going to bolster, you know, I'm going to go back and bolster my argument, get more facts, get more supporting, you know, data, or throw it away. It's a good testing ground, and it's served us well in that regard.
So I want to ask one quick question, because we have a participant who has to leave early, and it's a good question. So I'm going to pop it before you guys, and then we're going to get into breakout rooms, I promise. I know I keep saying it. So this participant said, don't you think in addition to core principles, there are core values that should be setting the common ground and facts? For instance, with all due respect, I see nothing to discuss about the George Floyd incident. It is pure murder. Where does the talk start about issues like this? So what are your thoughts?
I think that is what so many people are wrestling with right now, is that the things that have happened just in the last 7 months of this year are some of the most difficult and challenging kinds of conversations we can have. And listen, I'm on your side. There isn't a debate about what happened to George Floyd. He was murdered. He was murdered by police officers. And I'm certainly not encouraging anyone to debate that issue. I don't think there's a debate about that. There is a debate, though, a big one, about what we do about it. How do we get to a place where my son, who's now 16 and driving a car and looking like every bit of an adult, of a black man, how do we get to a place where I don't have to worry about that happening to him? Where I don't have to have the same conversation with him that my mother had with me when I was 16 driving around about being afraid of the police. There are a lot of different ways to think that through. There are a lot of different ideas about what we could do different, how we could change that. And, you know, disagreeing about the nature of what systemic racism is or is not, or how it plays out, should not hold us back from engaging with the people who think differently than we do about how to fix it. So like Nolan and I don't see eye to eye on all of this stuff. I'll say it up front. I mean, he says things about this that I can't for a second begin to understand. But I know that he understands that there is systemic racism. He knows that things are not equal in the society, and he'd like them to be. Now, he might want them to be made differently, to be made better in a different way than I do. You know, the debate is not about, it doesn't have to be about the way that we understand and interpret these events. It should be about how we all need to be able to work together to get to another point. The last thing I'll say is, sometimes you reach a point where that conversation, it's not time for that conversation, right? It's not time yet for that conversation. The protests that are taking place right now, the people who are in the streets, they belong there, because that is another method of drawing attention to this. That is a method of making it clear how urgent this problem is, and putting pressure on the systems that maintain systemic inequality to change, to make it clear that, look, you've got to change. And it's not time yet necessarily to have those conversations. It may be time for other kinds of action to take place to make sure that this stops. But in the end, to get to a better place, we're not going to get there on our own. We're not going to get there one side dragging the other along or leaving the other behind. We're going to have to figure out a way to talk about what should be different and how we get there. And what we're talking about in civility is, when you get to that point, how do you have those exchanges with somebody who sees it differently than you do?
And there's one more question. I know I keep saying this, but this question I think wanted to be asked as well before the breakout room, so I'll put it out there. So this person said, how does a conservative initiate an honest conversation when so many are being canceled, fired, shamed, etc., just for being a conservative in this day and age? A poll out of Cato came out recently showing 62% of conservatives are not comfortable talking about their politics openly. So
Actually 72%.
72%, okay.
But it was 52% of everyone. And that should really chill us, that we're not, you know, that a majority of us, right or left, don't feel comfortable having a conversation, because we're never going to get anywhere unless we can have a conversation. I would say to that people are being canceled on both sides of a lot of college professors, a lot of good liberals being canceled. I think it's a destructive movement. I hope to see it end. I will move behind that soon, because you can't have people afraid to talk. The first step here is to create an environment of trust. And if people sit down to a conversation and in the back of their head, they're saying, man, I got to watch it. I got to watch it. I may say something that's going to put me on a street with a can and a sign that says, that's not healthy. And that is just driving our differences underground where they're going to fester. And I think we have to create safe places where people can say, in the spirit of trying to gain understanding, can say whatever, ask any questions, say whatever it is they want to say, and then we can debate it and discuss it. And if it's offensive, if it's accidentally offensive, we can explain why. If it's intentionally offensive, we can discredit it. We have to get beyond this point that, you know, there are speech police out there that are keeping us from having healthy, productive discourse, because that process can be very messy, and you can get your and as we talk with one another today, I think we commit to, we're going to not play gotcha if we hear some trigger word or whatever, that we're going to try to talk each other and help explain to people, why appropriate, and have that person explain us what they meant. Again, start with trust.
So I think that's a really great place to do breakout rooms, because I hope that everybody takes away into these small group discussions that we're all going into this with the best of intentions and we want to be open. So with that in mind, I'm going to put you guys into breakout rooms of 4 to 5 people. And the question we want to talk about is what motivates your political position. So in terms of wherever you are politically, what's behind that? What motivates your vote, your position, just sort of broad sweep issues, what is important to you? And let's make sure that everybody has a chance to contribute. And so we'll do that for about 7 minutes, and then we'll bring people back in. All right, here we go.
How many people do we have, Lynn?
Well, we had 45, and then people started dropping off when we said we were going to breakout rooms, which did not happen last time.
Oh no!
Yeah, so I have to see how many we have right now. We have, let me just see, we have 8, 32, 35 right now. So we lost like 10 people.
We lost 10 people in the breakout. People are like, I don't want to do
Last time we didn't
that.
lose anybody because of the breakout room. So that's
I
really
know.
interesting. Oh my goodness. Okay. Who knew? Who knew? But yeah, so we'll do that for 7 minutes and then we'll do another round. Continue to. Hey, Rebecca. So people are in breakout rooms. Would you like me to put you in one?
Hi, I was in group 6. Could you put me back in the group 6? Oh. I was in group 6 and I can't figure out how to get back.
Hey, Rebecca, I'm sorry.
Hi.
Do you want me to put you in a breakout room?
Yeah, I was in group 6. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was in group 6. There we go. Okay. I'm joining.
All right. Oh boy. Okay, we're having trouble.
How'd you get bounced back?
Well, there was a group that needed my help and I just took me there and then I'm like, wait, I gotta go back. So
Oh,
I'm not
that's
sure
fun.
why. Yeah, I'm not sure what to do about it. Let's see.
Did you get her back to her group?
I did.
That's so funny that you can control it that way.
I feel like God. It's very funny. Let's see if that worked. Okay. Lost the breakout. Okay, hold on. Let's see.
So the thing this afternoon went really well.
Oh, good. The chamber?
Yes.
Okay. Nolan said it would have been better with the moderator.
It would have flowed a little better, but we got to everything that we normally do, and
Okay.
I thought it was actually quite good.
Good. Good. Welcome back, everybody, as you all populate into the room. About 8 seconds before everybody just jumps in. I was telling Stephen it's like time travel. You're sort of going through the stones, you know? So, all righty. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. And what we would love to do is hear how that experience went for everybody. So we're going to ask that you could mute your microphone unless you'd like to offer some input and feedback about your experience. So if somebody would like to jump in and share a little bit about what happened in your group and how that felt to you, we'd love to hear about it.
Marty, you got your hand up.
I did. That may be a mistake, but well, the discussion we had actually I thought was really kind of nice. It somehow we swirled over to the meaning of the word marriage in today versus what it may have meant in the past, and whether becoming more open to different concepts of the word marriage in any way undermined the original meaning, of the word, and can we allow a broader number of diverse people to use the word marriage without being somehow troubled by it. But what was nice in the group, I think people were, in a very short period, very open about feelings or changes. And I thought for all of a few minutes, it was a very, I think everyone left better than not worse. So it was a very nice group. That's my quick, maybe somebody else felt differently, but I thought it was a nice little discussion on a tough topic.
I noticed also a couple of people have already said we needed more time, and I should have told you, you're going to say that because we try to keep this, tight, and we come back and we talk, and it's lovely that everybody wants to connect more. So we will give you a longer period in the next breakout room with the same people so that you can go a little bit deeper. But it's really good feedback to have that you guys wanted more time. So how about somebody else? Thank you, Marty, for sharing. Is there anybody else who'd like to share about the experience or what your group was like?
I'll go. Nolan was in our group, and he did a great job to get everyone to, talk about their motivation, and people were very honest and able to bring in their own experience in such a short time. But we didn't have time for me, and I just wanted to say, when Nolan was expressing his background in the South and working hard and being poor and having to work for his college education, and that's why he became a conservative. I came from the city with an auto worker who was frequently laid off as my dad, and we couldn't have gotten by without a handout from the government for food. I can still taste that powdered milk. And I couldn't have gone to Marygrove College without the state of Michigan full scholarship just because of my grades. So I am a Democrat liberal, but I think we had some things in common back there.
And it's interesting to see that, similar experiences shaped, took us in different places. And boy, I can remember my poor mother putting those gray cans with no labels on them in the pantry and closing the doors so nobody'd see them when they came in the house,
But Nolan, I just want to say one quick thing. Similar backgrounds, but you're a male and Liz is a female. That made a difference.
There's all kinds of differences.
Yes.
As she said, she was in the city, I was in rural area. Whole different set of experience.
Yeah. Who else would like to offer some input about your experience in the groups?
I would.
Thank you.
I was in Marty's group. We were talking about the marriage thing. And as someone who is part of the LGBTQ community, there was a little discomfort, but I know that it was from a place of honesty in a differing view. And I know that that when there were disagreements, nobody was trying to be offensive or anything. And so I just think it's sort of even if there is some discomfort around things that are being discussed, it's still important to discuss them, especially with people who differ from you.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for sharing it. Stephen and Nolan, could you talk about that a little bit about, I think people jump to conclusions when they hear a comment that they might take offensively. And I don't know if any of us are programmed to give the benefit of the doubt or maybe ask a probing question to understand where somebody's coming from. So I just wonder if you have any words of wisdom about how all of us can, help steer it in another direction.
Don't make assumptions about, based on looking at somebody or based on things you think about their lives or what have you. Everybody's layered. Not all people on the left think the same way. Not all people on the right think the same way. And thank goodness for those layers. If we ever get to that point where there's only two rigid views and no room for anything else, and you all were talking about marriage. When I first came to this job 20 years ago as editorial page editor, gay marriage, a very hot issue. We, had to address and had to discuss. And I remember having conversations with, my editorial board, and very, very passionate conversations about it. And, we came to the conclusion back then that as conservatives, as people who believed in little government, small government, that opposing, gay marriage would be the wrong position for us. And, that was our sort of official position, is that wasn't a place for the government. That was your private lives. And, and personally, as a conservative, as a, as a Christian person, as everything else, my view of it was, everybody just gets one life, and you have a right to be as happy as you can in that life, as long as you're not hurting anybody else. And, that's sort of been principle.
Yeah, I also think, this question of, how to talk about difficult things without taking offense or offending is it's one of the thornier problems that we have, which is that we're all conditioned right now to take offense at everything, at anything that bumps up against our idea of the way things are supposed to go. And I think you want to pull yourself back from that. I think you really want to, we've been talking about pulling yourself back from the things in our culture that drive us to this space like that, like social media, like cable news, and really trying to give people the benefit of the doubt up front. Don't assume that people are meaning to offend or insult with the things that they're saying. But also, when they do, when someone says something that's quote unquote offensive to you, your first reaction could be to try to figure out what they really mean or why they're doing it. And most people are not trying to insult other people. A lot of people don't know what's offensive or what's not. And some of what we're experiencing right now is the sort of growing pains and kind of elastic responses to pluralism, to increased pluralism. I mean, you think of how much more diverse this country is right now than it was 20 years ago. And I'm not just talking about racially, I'm talking about everything. I mean, culturally, in terms of gender and gender equity. I mean, lots of things are different, and there are people who get caught behind the curve. They don't know what the right terminology is or what not to say right now. Now, of course, there are people who do and who are trying to be insulting, and I think you got to meet that where it is. But I think you got to be slower to assign that kind of animosity to people. You have to be a little more tolerant. I've been telling a story lately about one of my kids goes to a school that is changing a lot in terms of its demographics. It's becoming a much more diverse place than it used to be, and they recently hired an African-American man to be the headmaster of the middle school, which is actually a pretty big deal. I mean, this is a place that would never have happened 10 or 15 years ago, let alone 40 or 50. And someone in the school community came up to this new headmaster and said, I just want to thank you for being here, and I want to thank you for being Black. Which is not the right way to express whatever sentiment he was trying to express. But it's also not an insult. I mean, this is not somebody trying to insult this person. It's not somebody trying to offend anybody. This is somebody who just, I think, didn't know what else to say. And so, you know, the headmaster said, you know, it's not a big deal. You know, there were some people who thought, look, we gotta address this. We gotta make a big deal out of this. And, you know, the better way, I think, is to say quietly to that person, hey, there's a better way to express the idea that you were expressing there. Here's the way it is. Now, that could have become a big controversy. It could have been reason to start a major conflict over these things. But the progress that's being made by hiring that African American as the headmaster is almost inevitably going to inspire difficult conversations and reactions. And you can't overreact to those reactions. I think what you got to do is focus on the progress that's being made and try to get the culture around it to adapt a little better.
And I think Ryan got it exactly right. She didn't assume ill intent. I mean, she acknowledged that it was a little bit uncomfortable, but she also accepted that these people weren't trying to hurt. And I think that's that's where we got to get to.
So we have some really good questions in the chat, but we also have a second breakout room that we'd love to do. Are you guys on board with doing one more breakout room, and then we'll come back to those questions? All right, so I'm going to put you back into your groups, and the question we want to talk about this time is a little bit more personal, and hopefully you guys are open to that. But what we want to look at is what things in your background or your upbringing or your value system bring you to your political place. So think about that for a minute. I'll pop you into the groups, and then I'll put the question there, and we'll give it 10 minutes. And I would love to give you more, but we do have to finish at 6:30, so I'd love to hear how it goes. So let's give it 10 minutes, and I'll put the question in a moment. Good luck.
What's the question? What is it?
What brought you to your political beliefs?
What
in your background and your upbringing?
Welcome back, everybody. I'm sure we could have used more time, but time seems to just get away from us.
Great.
There's everybody. It's like
we all are.
It's crazy. So how did this round go? How was it different? Better or worse? Tell me what happened.
What room?
The AFC room.
What is that?
The special elections room.
Sorry? Who would like to share their experience in this round?
It's actually really easy. Just the kids' dash just spray it.
Anybody?
I'll share my experience.
Thank you, Brianna.
Basically, I just shared, like, you know, my self-awareness. It says I'm muted. I don't know if y'all can hear me.
We can hear you.
We're here.
But my self-awareness, you know, I wake up every day and I'm aware that first I'm a woman and second that I'm a Black woman. So with that being said, like, my family always taught me, you know, you gotta work twice as hard because, I mean, we don't come from money or anything. So just basically what my family distilled in me, their floor is my ceiling. So I'm just trying to build off of that. Like, that definitely shaped me. I try to work hard, and even the opportunities that we have, like, I wouldn't be at this university if it wasn't for like athletic scholarship. So just like things like that kind of shaped me as a person. You know, I always try to take full advantage of every opportunity given to me. And that basically shaped my views and how I look, because where I came from is kind of poverty and, you know, all this stuff, but that basically shaped how I view basically what I seen. But I also love having these conversations because that also shaped my own political views, just having a better understanding from other people and being open-minded. Like I said, I'm a very open-minded person. So I like to understand like what makes you think the way you think, and I like to share my own, what makes me think the way I think. But that's just a little bit, I can talk all day, but that's just a little bit about what we talked about.
Thank you so much for offering that. I really appreciate it. And you have such clarity of what's driving your views. That's really cool. Thank you. Somebody else like to share what their experience was in this second round of breakout rooms?
It's interesting, in our second short little powwow, I realized that compared to the first one, I thought, oh my goodness, we're just speaking to the choir. We all think the same. You know, how did, you know, this is, you know, this kind of a group. And in the second session, I think 2 of them are from the other party.
Interesting.
Yeah, but there all that commonality, and then.
Very cool. That's such a cool realization.
Reach that second conversation, you could have that more difficult conversation and see past maybe your differences, be able to talk.
True.
You did have commonalities before you got into your differences.
Wouldn't it be interesting if we started with the second topic, where do we come from and what informs it, and then we got into politics?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it doesn't happen on social media, but that's what Stephen and Nolan are trying to teach, right? Start there, right? Anybody else, would you like to offer some of your input from this round before we go to the questions?
I was just thinking that I guess you got to question all of your assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
The assumptions are automatic, okay, and if you think about things a little bit and you talk a little bit, those assumptions come into question. So just the conversations we had just put that idea that you got to question your assumptions a little firmer in my mind.
I can clarify kind of what he means a little bit. We were talking about like race and like.
Ryan, you just went mute. I'm not sure why.
Oh, we were talking about racism, and he brought up a quote from the governor that like, he said that like most white people are racist, and I brought upon the idea of people not being like not trying to be racist. They're racist. They're like accidentally racist.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just more context for that.
That's a really good point. And you know, I mean, I don't know, Stephen and Nolan, if you have any thoughts. I think a lot of people are accidentally racist or accidentally offensive, not intending that. So what do we do with that? How do we engage in that conversation if our instinct is to say, oh my gosh, this person just really crossed a line, said something inappropriate? You know, how do we steer that conversation to still be productive and towards civility?
So I think, you know, not overreact, right?
We lost you, Stephen.
Oh, am I here?
Yeah, you're there.
Sorry. I think not overreacting is the first thing that you got to do. You've got to be able to extend the benefit of the doubt even beyond what you might think is reasonable, because I think if the goal is to actually have dialogue, then that benefit of the doubt is where it starts. You know, I think it's helpful for people to think of things in the context of institutional inequality, as opposed to you know, individual acts of inequality. And I think having that conversation is really important. You know, we are all, whatever our ethnic background or our demographics, we all exist inside a system that is systemically unequal. It was designed that way, and it has performed that way since the beginning of the country. Now, does that make us all racist? In some form, sure. I mean, we are all party to a system that operates with racism, you know, at its core. But to assign that individually, I think, is a really different paradigm, and is less productive, I think, than talking about how it is systemically a part of all of us and all of our interactions and every nook and cranny of the country that we live in. I think trying to get to that space with people is a little bit easier. You know, it is very hard for people, white people in particular, to hear that they are racist, because most people don't think of themselves as racist, and they're not disingenuous in that thinking. They may just not understand what systemic racism really looks like. And I thought that, you know, the governor has done a lot to talk about systemic racism and how it plays out. But then she said what she said about most white people being racist. You know, that is true in the sense of the systemic form that it takes. It's not necessarily the most productive way to go about starting a conversation about it, because now I've got you on the defensive, and you're thinking that I'm accusing you of something, more than wanting to talk to you about how all of the things that we do and all of the interactions we have are tainted by this systemic inequality that was baked into the nation's founding.
I want to just ask you guys, this has come up in many of our sessions. I thought we could just spend a minute on it because we do have a couple of great questions I'd love to get to before we finish in 9 minutes. But, you know, the topic of social media comes up a lot, and I know, yep, see, I was waiting for that. There was you know, if you guys could just jump in and talk a little bit about how social media impacts this whole pursuit of civility and dialogue, that'd be great.
Well, it's just absolutely works against it. And I would encourage people, because more and more, particularly in this, you can't get out, talk to people. You can't go sit at the neighborhood bar. You're not self in face-to-face situations. To avoid trying to have meaningful, serious dialogue on social media, because it is a platform that breeds incivility. There's something about that place that encourages people their worst at times. And I read stuff, I mean, I get tech, or I read stuff on Twitter that people who are my friends, or at least I thought they were, and they're posting this awful stuff about me on Twitter. I'm like, what in the Sam hell? I mean, when did that become okay? And, you know, I'm reading this, and I think people assume an anonymity that's not there, or a shield that's not there, and so they can be their worst. And I just think it has been a major contributor to where we are today. I mean, look at how much of the president's dialogue is on social media, and how much better he would have been off, and the country would have been off, had he never discovered Twitter. Enables that sort of hatefulness and ridiculous conversation.
Stephen, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and again, social media is this wonderful tool with unbelievable potential that is being, warped and misused in its infancy in a way that makes it destructive to interpersonal communication. I am confident still that at some point it will realize its potential and become a productive means. But right now, it draws us to this behavior that nobody would indulge or countenance in the real world. I mean, people say and do things on social media they would never do to your face, the president included. Part of what the ask here is of this project that Nolan and I are working on is pull yourself back from that. Pull yourself back from what social media rewards. It's not just that it asks you to do, it rewards you for bad behavior. It's the likes that you get go up in many cases, depending on how nasty or dismissive your posts are. It's not just enough to block somebody on Twitter or Facebook, but then you post about the fact that you blocked that person. I blocked this person, and then that gets likes. I mean, it really is sort of a self-fueling destructiveness to interpersonal communication. You got to say, I'm just going to do it differently. I'm not going to lean into the things that social media is really asking me to do, and I'm going to try to relate to people the way I would in the real world. If I was sitting across the table from somebody, how would I talk about these things? What would I want to know? And it is hard because, again, everything around us right now sort of rushes in the opposite direction.
There's a great documentary on Netflix right now that you probably know about called The Social Dilemma that talks about this. There's also a book by an author named Gia Tolentino called Trick Mirror that looks at this too. So if you want to delve a little bit deeper into issues of social media and its impact on us, you can check out both of those. I'll put them in the chat. Very quickly before we wrap up, Claudia said, isn't it through greater understanding that new ideas, viewpoints, or positions emerge, common ground, and respect? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the very point we're making, is that the only way forward is through the difficulty of having civil, productive conversation. That we got to be able to talk to each other and really talk to each other in order to solve, especially the kinds of problems that we're talking about right now.
Then Cheryl asked, how do we give our legislators the responsibility of policies of keeping us safe when it's driven by politics? And then she added, we have people willing to start a civil war over face masks because they feel their liberties are impacted. So how do we take that responsibility?
I mean, politics have always influenced policy. That's the way our system gotten. We've suffered in Michigan from term limits. I've been railing about that for 10, 15 years, and it just never, never takes hold. But term limits has been a disaster. You go up to the legislature and it looks like, no offense, but it looks like a college classroom. There's not much maturity, not much in the way a life experience, and you can go 1 year, come back the next, and it's a whole new batch. And I think term limits have been a disaster. You got everybody looking for their next job, and it's really hurt policy making, the quality of leadership in Michigan. And I worry because it's getting worse. We're not giving these people the time to develop the leadership skills they need and create that next generation of, governors and senators and what have you in Michigan.
Yeah, and it's not just term limits, but it's also up to now the way that we have allowed legislators to essentially draw their own districts. They choose their own constituents, and because of the party influence there, what that means is that they choose constituents who they think will reelect them. And there isn't an effort, or there hasn't been an effort, to try to create districts where there is a broader set of common interests, not just a party affiliation, but common interests that would draw people across party lines to advocate for other things. And I think the conceit of the redistricting reforms that we adopted 2 years ago is to do it differently, is to remove party as the driving force there and try to insert some other things. Now, will that work? We'll see. It may not work. It won't work the first time for sure, like all experiments, right? We'll go through some failures, but it will inevitably be better than what we had, because it will take that partisan drive out of it to a great degree. I mean, Arizona is a really great example of what's possible when you do that. I mean, that's a very conservative state, but its legislature, its congressional districts ask leaders to represent more than the most extreme part of their base. And here in Michigan, on both sides of the aisle, that's what you have to do to get elected in these districts. You have to appeal to the most extreme faction of your party, not just to get your seat, but to keep it, because your biggest fear is not challenge from the other party, it's challenge from within. And we are going to go we're going to go in a different direction for sure. It may take us a while to get where we want to go.
Well, this has been amazing. I'm sure we could talk for a lot longer, but our time is up. So I do want to thank Oakland University Center for Civic Engagement and Dave Dulio for hosting this. We will add you guys to our monthly email newsletter, which just gives you additional tips for building civility and keeps the conversation going. And thanks to the generosity of Delta Dental, we are booking these programs in a variety of communities and organizations, workplaces. So if you have a church or a community group or something that might benefit from a civility session, please let me know. I'll put my email in the chat, and you can also go to GreatLakesCivilityProject.com. We are now booking for 2021, so please keep us in mind. And it's been so great. What'd you say, Nolan?
It's not going to get better in 2021.
Yeah, right. That's right.
All of us will make it better, right? We're all on the road towards civility. So thanks, everybody. Have a great night, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.